Good morning to you. Mark out of HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion now, September the 12th, 2019. And we have a lot to talk about. Some pretty dramatic changes overnight in regards to the future of Invest Area 95L. So let's get right to it. The National Hurricane Center upping the chances to 70 and 80% respectively over the next 48 to 120 hours. And they mention in this outlook here, and I'm going to scroll down so we can look at it in the paragraph form here, that satellite images and pressure data, etc., indicating that pressures are falling and the system over the Bahamas is becoming better organized, and that a tropical depression or a tropical storm could form within the next day or so as it moves towards the northwest, through the northwestern Bahamas and toward the Florida Peninsula. And they are talking about that maybe potential tropical cyclone advisories would be issued later today, and that it could be affecting the area with gusty wind, heavy rainfall through the areas where Dorian, right there, that were affected by Dorian in the northwest Bahamas, later on down the road the next couple of days. And this is a big change from what we were looking at just a couple of days ago. And they're sending Air Force Recon out this afternoon. That would be great because we get an idea on the structure of the system and so forth. So if we look at the satellite imagery here, courtesy of Tropical Tidbits, first of all, these two areas here in the eastern Pacific, no worries, no threat to Pacific Mexico or Hawaii. Our focus is going to be on this area here. We do have a disturbance way out in the tropical Atlantic, but it is not going to be of any consequence to the Lesser Antilles, Barbados, Trinidad, Tobago, etc. Anytime soon. We have plenty of time, and we'll take one thing at a time, and we do have enough to deal with 95L here. Now, what do we notice? We notice that still just kind of blobs of clouds. We don't have any distinct banding features just yet. That banding look to the system, we don't see that yet. It's still in its formative stages. But if we go and we look beneath the clouds, so to speak, at the vorticity signature, it is starting to get a little bit better organized down here in the vicinity of the central and southeastern Bahamas. And where this ultimately comes together, assuming that it does, will determine its fate overall. So if the low pressure area does in fact form over here as opposed to back over here, the surface center doesn't seem like that far apart, but that's critical in terms of what happens down the road. And there's another couple interesting things we can see in this imagery. Just looking at this imagery here, you can see this spinning right here. This is an upper level low pressure area in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere. It's not at the surface, and this system can't go into that. This is in the way. First of all, it's just not possible. They all have to move together. And then to the north up here, we do have fairly decent high pressure. Hardly a cloud in the sky over the Carolinas. It's a hot summer day, late summer day. So this is kind of stuck down here over very warm water. And upper level winds, if we go and look at that, are not ideal, but they're not absolutely terrible either. This is where the disturbance is. Generally the winds are fanning out instead of, something coming across like that with strong winds shearing it. And the upper level winds are forecast to become more favorable overall. Add to this is the upper ocean heat content map from September 10th. And I use red here. This is the 10th, and this is really important here. The system is trying to develop down here, ocean heat content high. It's right here in the middle, but that's enough, trust me. But notice what happens, especially if it were to track up through somewhere off the southeast coast. All right, let's just assume that for a second. Okay, scenario number one. It heads up off Florida, very similar to what Dorian did. Well, this was 2 days ago, the 10th. This was yesterday. See what happens up there? It expands in the western Atlantic there off the southeast coast. Dorian has gone by. Now this starts to fill back in. And that's important because those values are enough for an intense hurricane. Absolutely. And so, folks that were saying, well, Dorian left cold water in its wake. Well, it might be a little cooler than it was, but the Gulf Stream runs through here, comes out of the Caribbean up the coast, roughly like that, and off into the North Atlantic. And that is a conveyor belt of warm, deep water. And this surprised me a little bit, just looking at the 10th to the 11th, and we get the 12th tomorrow. They're always a day behind, I believe, in how they do this analysis. So, don't shoot the messenger here, but this has the setup to be a formidable hurricane if it develops on the east side of Florida down here and stays off the coast and does something similar to what the European model was showing last night. And we'll go ahead and look at this out to 5 days. This is the initial setup. Get you oriented, 0Z. The analysis, we're at 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. Cyclonic vorticity. This tells me what the model is simulating based on this information here. This is the 850 millibar vorticity. So is this. But this is actually what's happening like recently, and this is the model interpretation from last night. All right, so let's make that very clear. Now, if we look and see, this is what we're talking about down here. So keep your eyes on this area. I'll put a box around it, and watch what happens. This is last night. Okay, this is 24 hours later. So this will be valid tonight, Thursday night. Notice what happens. In the vicinity of the Bahamas, and just to the north and east of there, is where the greatest concentration of energy starts to focus, the vorticity. It tightens up, and presumably a surface low tries to form right there. 48 hours out, you don't need me to draw anything. You can clearly see what happens. 72, and of course it's passing uncomfortably close to the Abacos and Grand Bahama, where Dorian just devastated that area. So relief agencies, people still, I mean, it's going to be a long time. Folks that are reeling from that disaster, this is the last thing they need. And I want to make sure people know about this. I mean, presumably all the big organizations are glued in and they know what's going on with the tropics, especially considering it's still very much hurricane season. So that's 72 hours. There's 96. It's like Dorian again. It's uncanny. But this can happen. You get these patterns. It's not unprecedented. We think Dennis Floyd in 1999, only several days apart, 11 days apart or something like that. Bertha Fran, 1996, several weeks apart, but similar tracks and impacts, etc. And there are other examples throughout history of hurricanes following each other within just days to weeks. Okay, it's not crazy. There's nothing, it's all from nobody's steering them, and it's not climate change causing this. This happens. We can go and look through history way before all this extra carbon was put in the atmosphere. There's other things going on. Yes, the climate is changing. Of course it is. It does all the time. We're still coming out of an ice age. I mean, come on. And there's some human influence, I'm sure. I mean, we're here. We're influencing it somehow. But to say that this is because of that would be incorrect, in my opinion. Now, before I get derailed onto that subject, let's keep moving forward. So, yes, we can get hurricanes following similar paths. It's nothing new. It's just unnerving, and it makes a lot of people anxious. And then if we go on, that's 96, there's 120. And my policy, we don't go look at deterministic model runs past 120 hours unless we're looking at a much broader picture of something out over the Atlantic, and it's more of a trend thing. So I want to be very careful with that, because it doesn't help anybody to look at days 6, 7, and 8, 9, 10, whatever. Honestly, it doesn't help, because there is no magic model that's going to get it right. What we can do is take a look at a couple of things in the near term. First of all, if we just go to 24 to 48 hours, and you're down here south Florida, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Deerfield Beach, West Palm, whatever, probably don't have too much to be concerned with this system. It's not a 0% chance, but it looks like, if the European is correct, that this would move more northwest, as I showed you. Now wait till I show you the GFS here in just a moment. So South Florida, keep an eye on it. but I'm not too concerned at the moment. Just want to make that clear. Farther up the coast, yeah, this could be concerning, because as this develops, assuming it does, whatever path it takes, we're going to start seeing the swells and the beach impacts, and we know what's happening. We just got power restored through some of these areas, some of those tornadoes that went through with Dorian, and then the impacts to the Outer Banks. This is not a big population center. I understand that, but it is important to North Carolina and the people who live and visit there. It is important to people who live up here who visit down here. So I got you. We're watching very closely, because this could be a big change. We need to see if this is one kind of a blip, and the euro is, oh, well, that was close, or is this something we really need to focus on? Here's another way to perceive this and look at it and visualize it. Same time frame, 0Z run, but a different map projection. This is the east coast of the U.S. over here. There's the would-be hurricane in the model at day 5. And you can see this big ridge of high pressure. Trough out over the Atlantic. This is leaving. So this can't yank it out. Just doesn't work that way. And then a trough, or sharp trough, in the west. And so you see your troughs and ridges clearly by these height lines in the atmosphere. But you also see the anomaly of the atmosphere too. And these reds, Levi Cowan's done a great job of helping to visualize this. These reds here, this gradient, indicating that the ridge is stronger, okay, by a certain amount. And we can't get into meteorology or we'll be here all day. For you and me, you can hear the weed eater guy outside, sorry. It's lawn maintenance day here at the Sudduth household. This shows me that heights are building to the north and west of the cyclone. And this is day 5. Like I said, we're not going to go looking out beyond that. But know that this is a huge player. And this is probably going to slide east. As this digs, this amplifies, and this could get to be a problem for the mid-Atlantic. That's your key to the future to look for. And we will look at that going forward, I promise. Now, just to be fair, all of this is the euro, all right? And there's day 5 on the euro. What about the GFS from last night's run? There's 48 hours on the GFS. There's 48 hours on the euro. Yeah, that's a lot different. 72 hours on the GFS. It's way over here. Big mess. Really not amounting to much. There's 72 hours on the euro. I mean, huge difference there. 96, sorry. There's 72, 72, 72. Big discrepancy. Why? The bottom line is the European, the ECMWF model there, making the genesis of this happen tonight, today and tonight, over here, whereas the GFS, not so much at all. Much loosely organized, never really bundles the energy very well, carries it on across into the Gulf, big rainmaker, wind, some impacts, don't get me wrong, but a far different scenario than that or that. So we have a lot to keep up with, that is for sure. National Hurricane Center, tip of the hat to you if I had a hat, if I was wearing a hat. They got a lot to wrestle with this system. So that's what I know now. Very interesting. Feel free to share this video. People might be like, what? I didn't know. I thought it was going to Florida or whatever. Well, maybe, maybe not. So later today we'll know more. The recon hopefully goes out there. We may get these advisories if it continues to show signs of organization. And I'll end with this. Let's look and see, does the vorticity, and I showed this earlier right here, does this continue to concentrate? I'll end on this. Right in here, let me do this better. Focus mark, does it concentrate right in here where the European suggests that it will, or is it more loose and less bundled farther south and west? I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball to know the answer, but we can watch that. So later today, I will do another update somewhere between the 4 and 5 o'clock Eastern Time hour, and we'll know either from the modeling that we see, the real-time visualization stuff like the vorticity signature, and of course what the National Hurricane Center says as we approach the tropical weather outlook at 2 p.m. That's a big key. And then maybe advisories around the 4 or 5 o'clock hour this afternoon. All right? So a lot to keep up with. It is peak time of the hurricane season. None of this should be a surprise. I know it doesn't make it any easier, but this is the time of year when we should expect sometimes the unexpected. I am Mark Sudduth. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. It's awesome to have you listening and watching from your device. I appreciate it. For HurricaneTrack.com, again, I'm Mark Sudduth, and I'll talk to you again in a few hours.